It's a mix of vintage and a mix of modern, and that creates a beautiful looking sub with a beautiful sound and one that's really easy to set up. Welcome back, everyone. Today I want to talk about a brand new, awesomely cool subwoofer from REL. It's more affordable. It looks like a piece of furniture. It's reminiscent of vintage RELs. It has a sound character that's quite a bit different from the subs I've talked about in the past from REL, like the S510, which I still own. This is the brand new REL Classic 98, and it is REL's vision of something that's a little more vintagey, something that has a mid-century modern vibe, something that will bring a more vintagey sound. And yes, subwoofers do have a sound. I've been listening to this guy for the past few weeks, and I compared it to my S510. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is what I discovered is this sub right here is much more suitable to my room because it's smaller. It doesn't have as much sheer subsonic power as the 510, which vibrates my room. And this puts out a really rounded, earthy, groovin' musical kind of vibe. And the thing I love about it the most, besides the awesomely cool retro looks, is the fact that for me, it was quite a bit easier to set up versus the S510, which took me a while to dial in, especially when I got to the dual subs. So with the Classic 98, John Hunter from REL, I read one of his articles that he's posting about this subwoofer, is they wanted to go back to kind of the affordability of vintage RELs. They wanted to go back to kind of the sound character of a vintage REL with some modern flair to it. For example, they're using their latest 300 watt Class D amplifier to power this. But this is a lot like a vintage REL, but in a smaller cabinet. It uses one 10-inch downward firing paper cone, and it is really a beautiful subwoofer. Just like the more expensive subs, this sub has a low-level input that you can use with a coax cable. For example, say your preamp or integrated amp, say you have a pre-out, a left and right, or even just a left. Some amps may have a sub-out, some amps have a dual sub-out. If your preamp has a pre-out, you can hook up coax cables to the low-level input and dial in the sub. Now, REL always includes their cable with their subs to hook up for the high-level input. Now, the high-level input actually goes to your amp's speaker terminals, but depending on the type of your amp, whether it's Class A, Class AB, Class D, there are different hookup instructions, but REL puts out videos on YouTube, and they are easy to set up once you learn how to do it. But as far as dialing it in, these go really well. This sub will go really well with a pair of two-way bookshelf speakers or even Klipsch Heresy IVs. This could be an amazing sub for your Klipsch heritage speakers, all the way from the Heresy to the Cornwall. And yes, the Cornwall can benefit from a sub, as do the La Scalas. And one or two of these guys at $13.99, because they're more affordable, would be an amazing setup with Klipsch heritage speakers. I wish I still had Heresies here, because I would have loved to have heard them with the Classic 98. But that's what this sub is all about. It's more affordable. It's easy to place in the room and set up. It's smaller and lighter weight, though it's still pretty hefty. And it has tons of power and force, but compared to something like the S510, it's not going to be as plunging to the depths, right, of that S510. It's not going to be as modern sounding and tight and refined. It's going to be a little bit woolly, just a little bit, but it's not a woolly subwoofer. Compared to subs I've heard in the $500, $600, $700 range, this is much tighter, has much more impact, and it just sounds beautiful. It doesn't create a muffled or dark sound once you integrate it with your speakers, and this would go really well with speakers also. Speakers like the Dynaudio Special 40s, Dynaudio Heritage Special even. I use them with some Triangle 40th Anniversary Cometes, which come in at around $2,500. And they're kind of giving me a little bit of the Klipsch Heresy flavor, but with a cleaner mid-range and a little more refined treble. This sub was right at home with those Triangle speakers. And those speakers only go down to 49 hertz in the bass. They're a little weak in the bass. If you take this guy, put the crossover to around 80 hertz, and adjust the volume for your space, say you're in a small to medium space, this will blend perfectly with speakers such as those. Well, hey, this is Sissy. She's a very, very old girl, 19 years old, and she's been on this property her whole life. But we're looking at the back of the REL Classic 98 today, and it has your traditional controls. You do have an LFE input here if you want to hook it up for home theater use, and this would be your volume control. Here's your crossover, 30 hertz to 120 hertz. Here's your high and low level volume control. You can hook up to the low level input. For music listening, you're going to want to use the low level input or the high level input. High level input goes to your speaker terminals on your amp. Follow the instructions for that, and the low level input comes from your preamps pre-outs or your subwoofer out. The crossover, say you have speakers that go down to 50 hertz. I would then put that crossover somewhere around 80 hertz, 90 hertz, and adjust the volume from there. You can set this up in a corner as REL suggests. I've tried it in the corner, I tried it between speakers, and I tried it next to the speaker, and I was able to get the Classic 98 to sound wonderful no matter where I set it up. It was really easy to set up. So this is a set it and forget it product. It will add that foundational bass to your system, which is very, very important in music. If you don't have bass, say below 60 hertz, you're missing a lot of information. This guy goes down to 27 hertz, though John Hunter said they were able to go down to, I think, 23 with certain organ music. So this is a very powerful, capable sub. A little bit of that vintage roundness and earthiness along with some modern slam and drive. A really, really cool sub. And she thinks so too. I also listen to these with the Alexandria audio monitors I have here, blended seamlessly. I also listen to it with the Daniel Hertz Ava speakers, which already go down to 30 hertz, but this added a little bit more of that weight at the very bottom. And that's what a good subwoofer does. It adds a foundation to the music. Back in the day, I used to listen to a lot of two-way bookshelf speakers. My problem was I never bought a subwoofer with them. So if they went down to, say, 60 hertz, I was happy with that little bit of mid-bass that they were pumping out. But I was really missing that foundation to the music. And I didn't really notice all of that I was missing until I heard the REL S510, which is a powerhouse, a beautiful sub for high-end systems. And listening to the Classic 98 over the last few weeks, I realized that this sub is a much better match for my small room. I have a 13 by 18 room. One of these guys fills it perfectly and with just enough oomph and power and drive. But again, it's not going to hit and slam like the modern day sounding subs. It has a little bit of that vintagey vibe to it. But you can see here the 10-inch cone, and just like the RELs of yesteryear, this is a down firing sub. And I have to say, this looks similar to some of those older REL designs. It's not light, but it's not a beast either. The difference with this one is The build, the design, it's vintagey, it's retro, it's meant to connect with those emotions in you, especially if you used to have systems in the 70s and the 80s, or you used to own some classic REL subs. This is kind of going back to that. And it's affordable. You're not paying $3,000, $2,800 for this thing. $13.99 gets you this furniture grade quality, beautiful sub. So if you have two-way speakers, bookshelf speakers, like I said, Dynaudio Special 40s, some KLH speakers, those Klipsch Heresies, this sub will be magical with those speakers. And you don't have to spend a fortune to get one of the higher end REL subs, which are really meant for those uber high-end speakers that have that extra finesse, that extra detail, that extra refinement. This is going to give you that earthy, big, plump, juicy sound. You set it and forget it, and it just works. So I'll link in the description to more information about this project from REL, the Classic 98. If I can find John Hunter's blog post, I'll link to it so you can read his words about what made them design this sub. It was born really during the pandemic in 2020 when most of us were locked down in our homes. A lot of people were buying audio, but John Hunter of REL pulled out some classic gear and he said, we should make a sub that kind of matches this vibe, you know, but with some modern flair. So it does have the modern 300 watt Class D amp in it. So it's a mix of vintage and a mix of modern, and that creates a beautiful looking sub with a beautiful sound and one that's really easy to set up. This is really a remarkable sub. I have an S510, which costs quite a bit more. And to be honest, I kind of prefer this one in my room. It's really, really a cool sub. So more information if you're interested in the links below. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Classic 98. And I will see you guys very soon in the next one. Bye.